Hi guys, this is Alex and welcome to Series 1, Episode 3 of this tutorial series H SoundWorks Scores. So in this episode, I'm going to run through the instruments and plugins I've used, why I've used them, and certain techniques I've used to achieve a particular sound. So let's get started. Yes, my main go-to orchestral library stuff is Spitfire Audio Albion 1. Not only do these strings sound amazing, but it's also got incredible brass patches and woodwind patches as well, but it's also got a very nice percussion library through the Hyper Toms, XXL Toms, Easter Island, and all sorts of things like that. But also it's got the Stevenson's Steam Band synth, which sounds amazing. I use it a lot for ambient pads and drones and things like that, and often layer all of them up to create a really nice cinematic feel. So yes, I often use Albion 1 for a lot of my stuff, and there's a lot of the string stuff on here. However, I know some composers don't like to do it, but I feel that when I layer a lot of my strings with different libraries, I personally feel like it enhances some form of realism. So for my violin parts and viola parts, I layer it up with this Native Instruments session strings. I EQ them a little bit to kind of have like a little bit more high end, a little less low end to give, just to cut through the mix and kind of have a little bit more of an underlying texture which sounds nice and complements in with the Spitfire stuff to create quite a nice kind of like whole string sound. For the cellos, I actually downloaded a free VST plugin from VST Buzz called the Pocket Placus, which sounds, sorry if I said that wrong, but it sounds amazing. It was free. It's quite a nasally sounding cello, very in your face, quite old fashioned actually, but when layering in with all the Spitfire stuff, I think it just sounds really nice. It kind of really gives a nice underlying texture to the sound, and I just think working in conjunction with those other string libraries, it just sounds really mellow, and they just fit together. They all complement each other. So in terms of the string stuff, I mainly use Albion 1, and then I kind of dive into a few other libraries to kind of achieve a certain sound. So maintaining the realism out of string libraries, and any orchestral libraries for that matter, is absolutely imperative. And there are a couple of things I do in the production process to make this happen. So for example, my main thing I use is MIDI CC1, or otherwise known as the modulation wheel on MIDI controllers. So when I use this, I often play in with that modulation wheel to kind of really get a nice expression and feeling control of the sound. So that's perhaps the most important thing. Often after I play it in, I'll go into the DAW afterwards and tweak it using this. See, I'm not sure if you can see, but just all of this modulation data. If something's not quite right, I'd always kind of just like slightly tweak it. So I want to get that correct envelope, to get that realistic sound of a real string player, of a real brass player. Just try and working around all of these various like MIDI functions and things like that to really get that realism as high as possible. So aside from the modulation wheel and the MIDI data, I also use automation as well. So on this whole string bus, I've actually used a lot of automation for all of the strings. So what I would do after I put in all the modulation data, when it's all written, like it's all ready, I would often just ride the fader on the whole bus, see how it sounds, just to kind of give that extra expression from all of the strings. So I'll just demonstrate it for you now. Here's without any automation, the string bus. I'll solo out the strings actually, just so you can hear. And here's with that automation. So it's just that extra bit of expression, that extra bit of control that gives it that realism, and using small little production things like this really enhance that. In terms of pianos, it really depends on what I'm working on and what the genre is and the feel of the picture and things like that. So I often use stuff from the Native Instruments library, so the Grandeur, the Gentleman upright piano, the Maverick, that sounds really good. If I'm after a specific sound, of course, that is. But for this stuff and this particular piece, I've actually used the felt piano or soft piano from Spitfire Audio. I find it's got a really nice, gentle, subtle quality that sounds really rich and really enhances this this type of multimedia. It sounds really quite eerie actually as well, and quite mysterious. So I really like that aspect of it. I've actually used quite a lot of the lab stuff from Spitfire Audio. It sounds great. Things like crazy stuff like the kitchen sink libraries, cajon libraries, harp libraries, all sorts of things like that. And they're really cheap. It all goes to charity, so it's a very good cause. But I love them. I think they're great creative tools, and I often use them in a lot of my scores. So go check them out. The final instruments I've used on this particular piece in this second section with the piano were the ambient pads. So I layered these up. I've had one Stevenson's Steam Band synth from Spitfire Audio, which sounds amazing. I often find with things like this, I find the presets and I kind of often mess with things like effects, the filtering, and also the oscillator mixer as well, between both of the oscillators, which is actually a really cool creative tool. So I use this. I was holding a low G on both of these, which kind of gives a really nice, cinematic but powerful effect. So when layered underneath with like another pad, that sounded really kind of powerful and yeah, just really cool. So I used the Stevenson Steam Band synth. I go to that for a lot of ambient drones and pads and things like that. And I also used a Halion pad preset as well. It's just a vocal preset, but it's one that I've rolled off the cutoff, increased the resonance so it doesn't really resemble a voice. It just kind of like acts as a really kind of like cool underlying powerful pad. So when layered up with that Albion pad, it really gives a sense of underlying sub, which is kind of what I was going after. So here is it with it. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear the difference properly, but here. And here's without. It just loses everything. And hitting that F sharp at the bottom, giving a slight sense of like kind of like eeriness, uncomfortability. So yeah, those pads really made a difference, and they were the final instrument I used. So that was it for episode 3. Join me for episode 4, where I'm going to be talking through the second section of this composition, including the piano part, the theoretical and compositional aspects. So I'll see you then.